as those spoken and unspoken joys and sorrows settle into our hearts, I invite you into a time of meditation and prayer. I invite you to find your pulse, find your breath, find your stillness. With each inhale and exhale, may we become more aware of our interconnection, that our shared breath is the only breath, and that this heartbeat rhythm the very first rhythm we ever know, this rhythm, it's a life-giving rhythm. Today, I play this rhythm on a drum made from animal skin that used to possess its own heartbeat, and now I honor it with a reverent heartbeat. But you can play this heartbeat anywhere, on your chest, on your lap, on your desk. Tap into that life-giving rhythm. Just as our breath is shared, just as our heartbeats are shared, we share wisdom. We share this human experience. We share our joys and our sorrows, our disappointments and our hopes and dreams. We share them to speak them. Because we know the power of listening. We know the power of listening to our own voice speak a truth. Speak something that has been waiting to be spoken. So with each beat, we listen deeply. For what's between those beats. That break, that pause. Perhaps that's leaving room for the spirit. You can go back to this divine, life-giving rhythm anytime you need. It's right there. And breathe that divine breath that we share, the gift of life breath that we have to cover and protect and distance ourselves, that sacred breath, that same sacred breath. We are grateful. We are full of life. Blessed be. May it be so. And amen. Gail, there's that button near the top of your Zoom that says stop sharing screen. I think that might need to be pressed again. Thank you, Gail. We are allowed to arrive again and again and again and continue arriving. So thank you for your patience and your grace with this team that works tirelessly, that commits their time during a time of worship to be behind the scenes, making sure that you have a smooth experience. We are grateful. This morning's theme of deep listening got me thinking about that film from 1997. The film that is based on a book by Carl Sagan, the film Contact. Do you remember that? Some of you may have read the book. I'm sure it's better. I should get to that one, but I loved the movie. I still love the movie. And in that film, we're introduced to the character Ellie Arroway, who's a curious girl. She listens to the CB radio, hoping to hear a response. And soon after making an exciting new contact in Pensacola, Florida, her father dies. And she's wrecked with grief. And then the film cuts to Ellie as an adult scientist listening to the unknown yet again on these large headphones. Only this time as part of a scientific study of life in our universe other than us. And most of her colleagues have advised her that this is professional suicide, listening for little green men. But she's determined. And meanwhile, she continues to grapple with the spiritual distress of losing her father at such a young age and knowing that she can never affirmatively make sense of what happens after death. Not through science, not through proof, not through investigation. There are some things that we simply cannot know. And I won't ruin the film for those who haven't seen it, but it just touches on today's theme beautifully because it's that feeling. It evokes that feeling when we know something in our bones. We know something is true. We know something is out there. There's some meaning beyond what we can make sense of or really understand. So we listen deeply. And sometimes we might listen like the Chickasaw poet novelist Linda Hogan describes in her book, Dwellings. It's a beautiful book, Dwellings, Spiritual History of the Living World. She writes, "Walking, I can almost hear the redwoods beating, and the oceans are above me, rolling clouds heavy and dark. It is winter, and there is smoke from the fires. It's a world of elemental attention, of all things working together, listening to what speaks in the blood. Whichever road I follow, I walk in the land of many gods, and they love and eat one another. Suddenly, all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands. How many senses were stimulated in that passage? You can almost hear the redwoods. You can smell and see the smoke. This world of elemental attention is sensory. It brings us back to our bodies, where we listen in a different way. We listen to what speaks in the blood. We listen to our bodies react, respond, have emotional, spiritual, physical responses to things and events and people and conversations. Every interaction, we are interconnected, and we are also impacted by one another and by our experiences. And sometimes we're listening so hard, listening to the unknown. Just tell me, I want to hear. We ask the divine. We ask, why or how long, O Lord, must I wait for this answer, for this message? We listen for the tangible, in which we have placed a heavy weight of expectation and hope. But then so often, doesn't a message come when we've softened and become quiet? When we've released our attachment and simply decided to be still, even for a moment, to take a break and be silent. And in that silence, there is something. Isn't it funny that the word listen has the same letters as the word silent? It's fitting because they're so related, listening and being silent. But there's got to be more to listening than just being silent. You know, there's activity to it, there's attention. But really, silence is a core element that I think we place on a shelf where we categorize types of silence, types of ways that we allow for others or things to emerge. If we're listening while preparing to respond, we aren't listening. We've put that silence on a shelf called when we're ready, instead of being fully present. And again, if what you hear when you are silent is complete silence, you might have a problem. You might need to check your battery, because that silence allows other sound to emerge. And I'm not just talking about hearing. I'm talking about the act of committing to silence. Sometimes that other is the wind in the redwoods, or the crackle of the fire, or the howl of those gods as they love and eat one another in Linda Hogan's piece. Isn't that a wonderfully odd line? But sometimes that silence that we practice allows the voiceless to speak, allows the one who has not yet been seen really seen, been given the space to speak before. There is a voiceless voice that has something to speak in their blood. Their ancestors have something that is waiting to be spoken, and we must commit to a practice of silence and to listening. Silence creates the space, and deep listening holds that space strong. It's something all of us need to learn or relearn because of how society has shaped us to value extroversion over the quiet. We want to fix, we want to get to work, we want to listen so we can respond. Susan Cain wrote a wonderful book entitled Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. It was a really comforting book to me as a borderline introvert extrovert, feeling awfully pulled professionally to the extroverted side. But as I read, she illuminated how culturally we've been conditioned to prefer extroverts. And it hasn't even been subtle. There were public published essays and letters in the newspaper from Ivy League schools stating the preference given to extroverted students and that introverted students would be better to change their ways or not apply. What if we didn't have introverted lawyers or medical doctors, people who could contemplate quietly and listen? That is not to be binary and hyperbolic about extroverts versus introverts. Susan Cain is very respectful and fair about her definitions and how the conditioned definition differs from the strengths of both. She's really trying to elevate these voiceless introverts who have been devalued. It was obvious during the debates in the recent weeks that some people in this world just can't stop talking. And some days we are only able to say, "Shut up, man." While in other moments it's more like, "Excuse me, mister, I'm speaking." But Susan Cain writes that there's zero correlation between being the best talker and having the best ideas. Remember that age-old adage, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. The idea that the most noticeable or loudest person in the room is the one who is most likely to get attention might be true, but just because they're hoarding the attention doesn't mean that they have the best ideas. And we know this. We've been warned, and we know how to see through it. We know how to listen with our wise mind, listen deeper, listen in a different way that's not confined to hearing. Our wise mind can sometimes see through that dazzle and focus on the best idea people doing the best work instead of those who are making the most noise. Ella Baker, the activist who the song "We Who Believe in Freedom Cannot Rest," she used to say that strong people didn't need strong leaders. We needed to listen to the community, have that emerge and rise up. We're hearing from our modern prophets, Adrienne Marie Brown, an organizer and activist, Black queer community. She's talking about emergent strategy. She's talking about what bubbles up in these conversations that can only be had by these people in the room. Not the conversation we plan to have, but the conversation only these folks in this room can have. How can we listen deeper beyond the constraints that we have set for ourselves, beyond the limitations, beyond our expectations of what we will hear and what we must do? I have another excerpt from the listening book that I shared during the Time for All Ages. I'd like to close with it today. It's called Dreamed Music. I dreamed I wrote a symphony, but when I woke up, I couldn't remember it. In my dream, I was the audience. And then I was conducting an orchestra, and then I was floating downstream on a river barge while along the banks curving lines of musicians played the score in perfect stereo. I could hear the resin on the bows of the violins, thrilling high trumpets, real cannon for drums. If only I could remember the music. If only I could write it down. No one can tell you that what you really hear when you dream music. The impression can seem more vivid than music, as if coming from somewhere inside of it. But the stuff of dreams is more rarefied than the stuff of music. The vibrations are finer, more like feeling than sound, more like the inhalation of a poet before she speaks a line itself. Just as dream light is soaked up in the light of day, dream sound is lost in the noise of wakefulness. Don't long for your lost music. You can't capture your dream symphony and bring it back alive to the conscious, rational world. But you can often clearly remember how the music made you feel. Go for the real meaning of the dream. Go for the feeling. These words from that book echo for me the words from our Unitarian ancestor, William Henry Channing, who was the nephew of William Ellery Channing, both thought partners in our movement. He wrote, really poetically, he wrote, "To live content with small means, to seek elegance rather than luxury and refinement rather than fashion, to be worthy, not respectable, and wealthy, not rich, to study hard, think quietly, talk gently, act frankly, to listen to stars and birds, to babes and sages with open heart, to bear all cheerfully, to all bravely await occasions and hurry never. In a word, to let the spiritual unbidden and unconscious grow up through the common. This is to be my symphony." What, William Henry Channing, what do the stars sound like? Or the language of birds, what do the babes have to say in their babbling, or the sages in theirs? It is a symphony that calls for a different kind of listening. Like the ways we listen to our bodies and we listen to dreamed music. As you live and breathe this waking life, may your dreams be realized as music. May the messages from Spirit reach you like the perfect song on the radio or the timer on the oven for that fresh batch of chocolate chip cookies. I invite you to always listen with your wise mind for the meaning behind the noise. and enjoy the music of your own silence while you listen to the unknown. Blessed be Ashe and Amen.